Welcome to the Celebrating Women podcast, co-hosted by Mandee Montana and Ashley Fisher, a podcast that celebrates women, their issues, their thoughts, their lives, conversations that celebrate their gifts, their talents, their courage. It's the Celebrating Women podcast. Presented by Hand & Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Hey, it's Mandee Montana. At Hand & Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, you can give your skin the essential hydration it craves by moisturizing the Hand & Stone way. Chelsea Everett, the lead esthetician at the Tyler, Texas location, says keeping the skin moisturized stimulates skin barrier functions, which is crucial to the health of the skin. Chelsea, I know you've got 3 key tips on how to best take care of your skin daily. Do you want to give me those now?
3 key things are keeping your skin moisturized, staying hydrated, and of course wearing sunscreen. Moisturizing and especially hydration go together so well. You have to have that moisture barrier to hold that hydration in. Otherwise you can drink gallons and gallons of water and it's just gonna evaporate right out of the skin. Also keeping the skin plump and slowing down the aging process a bit, but also, wearing sunscreen. UV exposure is responsible for 80% of early facial aging signs. So it's crucial not only for preventative aging, but for preventative skin cancer.
Chelsea, thank you so much for stopping by today. I just love your tips and I'm going to incorporate those into my daily routine. I so appreciate you stopping by today. And for all of our friends that are listening, remember you can stop by Hand & Stone Tyler in the Cumberland Shopping Center to make your appointment or online at handandstonetyler.com. Welcome back to the Celebrating Women podcast. I'm Mandee Montana, and I have a special guest co-host today, one of my dear friends, Dr. Lindsey Overstreet. She is a clinical psychologist, and she is the founder of the DBT Center Training Institute, and we've known each other since 3rd grade. So Lindsey's joined us for a previous episode with Ashley, you might remember, coping through the holidays, but she's back today because this is Mental Health Awareness Month. The month of May. So we're going to talk a little bit about Lindsey's journey, why she's chosen to be a clinical psychologist, what she's doing now, and we might sprinkle in a little bit about our friendship too. So Lindsey, I'm so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's really great to be here.
Yeah, it is. So the last time you were here, it was a lot of fun, I felt like, and also really informative and helpful during a time when people can be kind of on a wide range of emotions, from like really high highs of the magic of holiday season, but also that can really put into stark contrast some of the lows that we feel during that time as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think you gave us some really great insight and tools, but we didn't really get to know you. And one of the things that we love to do on the Celebrating Women podcast is hear people's stories and what shapes them. And we met in 3rd grade. I think we told this on the last one. I pursued you as a friend.
You sure did, which is good because I'm introverted and sometimes we introverts need extroverts to just adopt us and make us be their friends. And I think we made a really good pair because you adopted me.
I did. Or, accosted you, or I don't know, whatever 9-year-old Mandee did. But I'm thankful for your friendship. I feel like we've learned a lot from each other over the years. And as we were talking before we turned the mics on, it's funny because way back in middle school, which is probably when we really formed our closest friendship, when we were spending more time together in project classes and accelerated academics, we were kind of paired in the same classes in that way. I wanted to be a psychologist, and you wanted to be a performer on Broadway.
Sure did. That was the goal.
Wanted
to be a Rockette.
That's
and
right.
Then go to Broadway.
That's right, because we went to Rangerette camp together, which is another story for another day.
Sure is.
You learn about friendship whenever you go stay at camp in middle school. Oh, my goodness. But middle school girls, it's funny. I'm really thankful for my friendship with you during that time and a few other close friends that I've maintained over the years, because that's such a challenging time of life. And I know you have a calling for helping that age group specifically. I feel like you have a really great awareness and tender care and heart for the frustrations that we feel as we're coming into our hormones and we're like thrust into some adult decisions, maybe before we're ready for it often. And the decisions that are kind of wrapped up in that, you've shared with me over the years, that's something that you really care about, and a population of our world and community that really needs that service.
Yeah, absolutely. I do love the little middle schoolers. I work mostly, I would say, with 13 to 21-ish, the adolescent years. And it's so funny because a lot of clinicians really don't like those years. They're like, give me either little kids or adults, but not that middle period of time. And I just love it. I think they're great because when teenagers act like teenagers, it doesn't frustrate me. And I expect it. They're doing exactly what I would think they would do. And they have really big feelings because they have lots of hormones going through them. So yeah, love that group.
I'm so thankful for you. And then we both have friends that we grew up with, that one in particular that works as a teacher in middle school. And again, I think the three of us were shaped by some really great teachers that we had during that time that also allowed us and expected that kind of behavior
100%.
and allowed us to grow in that and, be dramatic and have the big feelings and be ambitious and have big dreams, and also manage to like pull us into reality
a little bit.
Yeah. And rein in that energy and kind of channel it into creativity a lot of times.
Yeah. And positive things instead of going down a negative route. I think you and I both, I will say, had really big feelings. I think we're both pretty sensitive people. And so, man, you add hormones to that sensitivity and woo! But we did have some really good teachers and mentors that helped us build really positive coping skills, positive ways of expressing ourselves that unfortunately a lot of kids just don't have. And so they end up engaging in more problematic kinds of behaviors and as ways to cope with their feelings.
So how did you go from wanting to be a rockette to pursuing clinical psychology? What's the bridge there?
I think there's a few touch points. I started dancing when I was 2 years old. And so I grew up in the dance world and was also a cheerleader and did gymnastics. And the first touch point was probably middle school, high school, being surrounded by a lot of eating disorders.
Did you know that's what they were at the time?
I knew about bulimia. Certainly, I remember reading a book, and now I can't think of the name of it, when I was in maybe 7th grade, and it was about a girl with bulimia. And so I think that I started to identify, and I think I also, there was a lot of problematic sort of like, and I was doing it too, taking, what were those, ephedrine, like
diet pills? There were things you could get at the gas station.
But it was like that period of time that ephedra was really big, and then it's been banned by the FDA because it destroys your heart.
Well, it's speed.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's speed.
Yeah. But like we were all, and I'm not going to implicate other people, but we were all taking those in high school. And I guess it was the older girls getting it for us, because I know it wasn't like our parents were buying them, I don't think.
Wow.
I know it wasn't that, but but I remember like taking those and being super jittery. And I also remember noticing, like knowing people that were vomiting after they ate, and knowing people who were like really restricting their calories. I don't know that I really understood probably anorexia at that point. Because I think when I was in high school, I was of the belief that restricting your calories was a good thing. But I went to boarding school for the last 2 years of high school. And that was another kind of touch point for me. I had a couple girls in my dorm who had pretty significant eating disorders, as well as some substance use going on, like not diet pills, but like substance use. And I became a peer listener. So I was somebody that people could come to call on our landline, anonymously or not. Like people could also, there was like, I had like a badge that said peer listener, so people could pull me aside and talk to me. And I had very minimal training in what to do, but I really loved that role. So I think that was kind of a touch point for like heading me in the direction of psychology. And then I took AP psychology my senior year, had a really, really great teacher. So my interest at that point was really sparked. Mm-hmm. I still started college as a vocal performance major. My plan was still Broadway, but I had a really bad experience with the head of the department, and I didn't want to sing opera. I wanted to do more musical theater, and I was being pushed to do something I didn't want to do. And so I was applying to transfer schools my freshman year, and my brother at that point was deployed, I believe, to Kosovo. I'm like, he was either in Kosovo or Afghanistan, but I'm pretty sure it was Kosovo at that point. And he just sent me a one-line email that said, "Have you considered Tufts?" And so on a whim, I applied to Tufts. And what I didn't know when I applied there is that they have, or at least at the time, I don't know what the stats are now, but at the time they had the only undergraduate clinical psychology major. And so when I got to Tufts, I played around with different things. Child development was one, English was one, Spanish was one. Psychology was always sort of pulling me in. And then I had a couple classes with some teachers that were clinical psychologists. One was a family therapy or family dynamics class, something like that. Dr. Greenwald, she was amazing. And then I had another class with this professor, Dr. Cohen. And they were just awesome. They were good mentors, much like we had in middle school that we talked about with our teachers, good mentors. And I wanted to be like them. It was one of those things where they were such dynamic teachers, but you could also tell, wow, you're really good at therapy and you help people, and that's really cool. Yeah, so I ended up you had to apply to be in the clinical psychology major. And there were only about 15 of us, maybe less, actually, maybe, I'm not sure, but around 15 in our class. So in our graduating class of like 5,000 or whatever it was at Tufts, only 15 of us were clinical psych majors. And so it was a really great cohort. We had a lot of classes together. At that point, I was still really interested in eating disorders. And so I did my clinical internship my senior year at a residential facility for adult women with eating disorders, really severe eating disorders. And I learned a lot. That's when I first started learning some DBT skills, was my senior year of college, and learned a lot about therapy, about the kind of insidious nature of eating disorders and how it really impacts your brain. I think at that point really, even though I actually decided about halfway through, I was like, oh, I don't think I really want to work with eating disorders. I don't think this is my population so much. And it's not my favorite thing to work with, but it was such a good learning experience. So I applied to grad school and interviewed and got in and went to grad school.
At Stanford. Let's not bury the lead. I mean, you went to an incredible school.
It was it was a very great experience. I feel very, very fortunate to have had such good training. And the training, yes, was at Stanford and also the Pacific Graduate School of Psychology. I had really good professors at both of those places, but really the training that I value so much was my practicum experiences. And that was where I was doing therapy, and I had supervisors who were just like transformational in helping me become a therapist, but also just developing who I was as a person. Because I went to grad school right out of undergrad. I was the youngest person in my cohort. I moved out to California when I was still 22. I turned 23 like the first week of school. And that's really young when you think about it,
I don't have any kind of context because I have an associate's and a certificate of photography. So I didn't even finish school. I didn't get a bachelor's.
You did get an associate's degree. So
yes.
Don't put yourself down there.
Well, no, I mean, it's just in the not that we're comparing, but I'm talking to someone who has a doctorate. So the year that you went to grad school, I went to work full time and was working with people who were in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Yes. So similar experience.
We actually had a very similar experience
Yeah.
because a lot of the people in my cohort were married, had kids, there were people in their 40s in my cohort. And I was just like little Lindsay.
So you've graduated, you finished school on the Pacific Coast. And then as you're transitioning into your practice,
First year of grad school, I had practicum training and was at a community mental health center trying to figure out what the heck I was doing. And I didn't know, but it was free therapy for people, right? And I had a supervisor and we videotaped all our sessions and watched them and learned from that.
Okay.
And then my next year I had another one. And that's really where my first couple of years of grad school, I was still really unsure if I was pursuing the right thing. I still was like, oh my God, I should have pursued music. Like, what am I doing in my life? But I think it was because I hadn't found the population that I wanted to work with yet. And then I started working with middle schoolers. I actually started working at middle school for practicum.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of happened, even in my first practicum, my supervisor was like, I think I've been told you're really smart and you can handle really hard cases. And I was like, I don't know if that's true. But I did. And my very first client ever was this like not suicidal. He was homicidal. He was this big guy, like probably 6'4", 6'5", like huge guy. And he just was homicidal. That experience really made me question whether this was going to be a good fit for me. Though he did get better, I would like to point out.
That's good.
But really my next practicum when I started working with middle schoolers was when it clicked and I was like, oh, I love this and I'm good at it. Mm-hmm. And what happened is the school counselor, school psychologist, I can't remember what his title was, at the school was like, don't bother with these kids because they're just bad kids. And I was like, you did not. And that it was like a challenge, right? So I started working with all these kids he told me not to bother with. I started this like boys group and really started working with kids that most people would just write off or shy away from. And I realized that they are super sensitive and just needed someone to believe in them. One, that was a big thing, and care about them. Even though I can look back and be like, oh, I wish I had all the skills and tools I have now that I could go back and treat them. It was a really empowering experience of like being able to help people that so many other people had written off. And I think that experience led into working with people with more serious mental illness, working with clients that other people didn't want to work with. I spent a couple years working with mostly gang members, like people getting out of their gangs.
I remember that.
And I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. And I think there's a lot of people that the world just writes off. And I thought, I'm not going to stand for that. And I didn't. And I still don't. And so that's really kind of what led me to want to get training and learn ways to work with difficult and or really high risk clients. So I ended up pursuing, it wasn't even practicum. It was an additional like mentorship. And that's when I started learning DBT, which stands for dialectical behavior therapy. And DBT it's a life-changing, life-saving treatment for a lot of people. And it's the most evidence-based treatment for problems with suicidality, problems with self-harm, problems with really high risk kind of behaviors. It's really the most evidence-based treatment for most mental health disorders, with the exception of anorexia. It's not that effective with anorexia and autism. Those are the two that you would want to do a different type of treatment. And things like schizophrenia or delusional type disorders where someone's not living in the reality that the rest of us are living in. So those are kind of the exclusionary things. But for most other mental health conditions, DBT has the most evidence for being effective. And so, but it's a really comprehensive treatment. and it's hard to learn and it's expensive to get trained in. And so most people don't do it. But I was very, very fortunate to have the mentor I had. And then I went to internship. So all of that stuff was practicum. Then I went to internship, which is a match, much like residency for doctors, for medical doctors. And I matched in Kansas, which was not what I was anticipating. But I moved.
You went from East Coast to West Coast to Midwest.
To Topeka, Kansas, which, fun fact, is the most mentally ill city in the world. Maybe the country. I might have to look up that fun fact. But
really?
Because there was a so Menninger Clinic, which was in Topeka for years, like 100 years, very renowned place. Like lots of people from around the world came to Menninger. There was also a state hospital in Topeka.
And Menninger was a mental health clinic.
Yes, it was a psychiatric hospital.
Okay.
It drew people like Anna Freud, Sigmund Freud's daughter came to Menninger and like she taught there for a while. And like lots and lots of famous psychologists and psychiatrists came to Menninger. But so there was Menninger and there was the Topeka State. And then in the 80s, Reagan passed some kind of sweeping laws around state hospitals and psychiatric facilities. And so most of the state hospitals closed at that point. And Menninger ended up moving to Texas, I think, for tax purposes. And what happened is all of those patients that had come from all around the world just stayed in Topeka without
care and treatment.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's the first day I got there, my supervisor drove us around in like his little van, and he was like, I'm going to give you my famous tour, Topeka, psychiatric ghost town. And so he drove us around all these places that were,
haunted.
No, like ghost town, like everyone left, but the patients are still here. Like
Gotcha.
All the psychiatrists and psychologists left. Mm-hmm. And all these buildings are just there. Like a lot of the hospital buildings and stuff are just there empty. And a lot of homeless people kind of camp out in them. And it's really sad.
It is really sad. I remember you telling me that the population there was vastly underserved, and that when you were working with clients that you didn't have the time to serve all of the clients that you needed to, and also process the paperwork that was necessary to serve the clients. I just remember you being vastly overworked.
Oh my God. It was insane. Yeah. I had like 90 something people on my caseload, which is you can't do good therapy with that many people because you're definitely not seeing them every week. But yeah, I would schedule kids during my lunch hour and get there at 6 a.m. and I would do all kinds of things to try and get them in. But it was a really tough year. It's a really tough year. I learned a lot about how poor our mental health systems really are. I think even working with the clientele that I worked before with, like the gang members and stuff that really impoverished and stuff, I didn't have a clue about how poorly funded our mental health care system is until I went to Kansas. And not just the mental health care system, but also like that was a big problem. There weren't enough providers. There just wasn't enough of anything. But also people were so impoverished in a way that I think it was such a shock to me, because we did grow up pretty sheltered,
Oh, definitely. And privileged and
you like know that poverty exists, but
we didn't see it on a day-to-day basis.
No. And to see that year really made me want to advocate and change things.
Yeah.
To see kids, like a lot of my kids didn't have electricity or running water. Like, how are you supposed to do therapy with people who don't have their basic needs met? You really can't.
Yeah.
And kids, I'll never forget these kids I worked with coming in barefooted in the middle of winter, and it snows in Kansas. It was like a tundra outside, and they were barefoot, no jackets. And I just remember thinking, like, this is hopeless. what is happening in America? Like that, I think that was my first experience of being like, wow, we live in this country that's supposed to be the richest country in the world, and yet we can't take care of each other better than this. This feels bad. So anyway, that was a year. It was a tough year, but it changed me, I think, in an important way, and I think has led me to kind of where I am now in starting my nonprofit, which we'll get to in a minute. After Kansas, I did my postdoc at McLean Hospital, which is a Harvard teaching hospital. And that was where I really got immersed in DBT and started seeing really, really severely mentally ill clients who were self-harming and suicidal.
Were they inpatient or outpatient or a mixture?
They were residential. That first year I was on the girls' residential unit, and we had patients from all over the world, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Canada, Mexico, and obviously all over the United States as well. And it was one of those things where, because it was like this 24/7 immersion in DBT, I knew DBT before, but that's really where I became a DBT therapist.
Yeah, like where you start to master skills.
Yeah.
Not just an understanding, but like your mastery.
And really saw like how transformational the treatment was too. So after that year was my postdoc year. Then I helped open an outpatient clinic, a DBT clinic at McLean. I was there for a couple years. And then I helped open a boys residential DBT clinic at McLean, and I was there for a couple of years. I really had a good 5.5 years of immersion in DBT, and also DBT PE, which is for trauma. I was on a trauma team, and so I did a lot of working with childhood trauma, that kind of thing.
And all this time, you're continuing to focus on like teenagers, correct?
Yeah. Teens and families. Yeah. And so, all of those clinics were for 14 to 19-ish age range. And I just love it. I still love it. So then I moved to Houston, and I wasn't really intending to stay here. And almost 6 years later, I'm still here. Moved here because my brother and his wife were having a baby, and they were moving here, and I wanted to be close to and help out my family, and so glad I did. My nieces are the best thing in my life, and I love being Auntie Lindsey. So I moved to Houston, took care of my niece for a little bit, and then I started working at the DBT Center of Houston.
And you love it.
And I love it. After 3 years, the owner of the DBT Center approached me and kind of said, I can see, I was supervising some students at the University of Houston, but not in a way that I really wanted to. There wasn't a program, not the way that I had supervision when I was a student. And I think that was another thing that I started to be like, wow, I'm so lucky with the training I had as a student. And like the people here aren't getting that. And it made me sad. And so I talked to my boss, and I ended up founding the DBT Center Training Institute, which is the nonprofit branch of our center that I also run and do all by myself. What we do, it combines a few things that I really care about. One, which is education. Obviously, I care a lot about education. I was in school forever. And I also feel so fortunate for the education that I had and the training that I had. So I train students, PhD students from the University of Houston, although at some point I hope we can expand to other universities. I train them in DBT. We do didactic trainings every week. We do group supervision every week. We do individual supervision every week. We do consultations with other therapists. We video their sessions and watch them and critique them the same way that I got when I was in school. So we're teaching these young therapists who are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and not burnt out yet, how to do a treatment that most people never learn to do because it's cost prohibitive, it's time prohibitive. It takes a long time to really learn and get good at this treatment, but it's life-saving. And so I'm teaching them, and then they offer pro bono therapy services to people who cannot afford, who either don't have insurance, because unfortunately, I forget what the statistic is, but a good chunk of people in Texas especially do not have health insurance. And a lot of them, even if they have health insurance, it doesn't cover mental health. Then therapy becomes really cost prohibitive for a lot of people.
Yeah, most people don't think they can afford it, or they haven't seen someone have a good experience with it.
Right.
I feel like, to the point that they are willing to pursue or be open to it. So they just think they don't value it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to do well over 1,000 hours of pro bono therapy.
That's amazing.
For our clients so far, and hopefully more and more and more, right? We've had incredible students. We're getting a new batch of incredible students in June, and they've really transformed the lives of these people who, and a lot of teenagers, right? And it's really hard when you've got a teenager who's self-harming and suicidal, and you don't have insurance, or maybe you have government insurance like CHIP or something, and that doesn't usually cover good mental health services. There may be some, but when you've got a kid who's in and out of the hospital for suicidality, you need somebody who knows what they're doing. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. I actually had a colleague from grad school recently reach out to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I've got 3 patients right now who are suicidal. I don't know how you do this all the time." Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I'm able to do it because I have this training that I pursued outside of our graduate education even, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's really stressful to have lots of suicidal people on your caseload if you don't know DBT. And you don't have this training, and you don't have a consultation team. There's so many components of it that it makes it really hard for therapists, even when they go to good schools, right? Even when they have good training, that if they don't have this training, they get scared and they don't want to treat people who are suicidal, or
they care, and it's a life in their hands, and they want to give them the best possible outcome. But if they don't feel that they're equipped, then they would rather someone like you take the reins. Yeah. Right.
And so what I'm hoping to see is we get more and more people trained in working with kind of high-risk clients with serious mental illness, and feeling comfortable with that. If we can get students learning that the way that I did when I was a student, then we can get more and more people who are able to work with the people who need the most help. Honestly. And then the cost issue, because we do have a lot of student loans, and most of us, and need to get paid, right? And so, but what does that mean for all the people who can't afford or don't have insurance? I take insurance, but if somebody doesn't have insurance, then we're in this I want to help you, but I also need to pay my rent. And so our students are getting this training and then offering pro bono services to people who don't have the resources.
But then they can later turn around and earn income for these services to pay their rent and pay back their student loans. So it's cyclical. But I love that you're able to offer that. You and I both have people in our lives that have mental health struggles. I think most people do, whether they're aware of it or not, on some sort of scale. There's something going on. I mean, I personally have my own. Don't mind saying it. Totally feel comfortable admitting that. And I think that that's a big part of where you have to start. Yeah. And the more people that are open talking about it, the more opportunities that may be available to create a safe space for people to say, okay, I need help. And what are the resources? I didn't know, I think I knew, but I wasn't 100% aware that your students were offering pro bono services to their community. But that's massive. especially coming out of where the world has been for the last 4 years.
Oh my gosh, after COVID and just
and transitioning back into workplaces and schools for these, especially for the teenagers that were out of school and now they're having to go back in, and all of them have these heightened fears and emotions and hormones on top of it and new challenges. Yeah.
Most of the people we work with have experienced some sort of trauma. About 76% of the clients that we have PTSD, qualify for PTSD. A very difficult thing to live with, but we have really good treatment for it. We have really good DBT PE, DBT PTSD are both really, really great treatments for it. And so I'm training my students in that. I'm training them in family therapy, because that's another area where people just aren't getting training. Like, people are coming out of social work programs and master's programs and doctoral programs without family therapy training, which I think is nuts. But anyway.
Well, you look at the holistic treatment of the person, and if that person that's going to therapy on their own doesn't have some sort of familial support in the healing, then the cycle would then just perpetuate.
Yes.
Right.
But I want to share, so my current students are wrapping up now, and we have new students coming in. And one of my students shared in supervision yesterday that a teenage client she's been working with for a couple years, who really was really struggling when she came in, told her, I never thought that I would have a good life, but now I do. And I just that, to me, it's this is why I do this. This is, I've been working 70 hours a week for the last 2 years trying to run this nonprofit and also, have my own clients and stuff. But when I hear stuff like that a teenager who was so hopeless, wanted to kill herself, self-harming before, says, I think I could have a good life. That's it. That's what I do this for.
That's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And how often is that happening and just maybe not verbalized, right? I know you've seen it, even if they don't use those exact words or tell you those things, but you start to see the behavioral patterns changing, and okay, this person could have ended their life. And instead, this person is going and making positive changes in their community and in their family and living a life of purpose.
That's full. That's meaningful.
Yeah.
And all the time. I mean, honestly, pretty much all of the clients who my students have seen, I think we're going to do a survey at the end. So I'll have more data when they leave. But my expectation is that all of them say that they're better off now than they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And it's so meaningful. It's so amazing to see, especially with some of the cases, the trauma, see people have, even just that, so many people have met criteria for PTSD when they came in. We would give them surveys every week, and now they don't. They're not having nightmares. They're not having flashbacks. They're not having re-experiencing symptoms. They're not afraid to be intimate with their partners. And that is life-changing.
It is.
That's life-changing, And so, and to think they wouldn't have gotten help without having pro bono therapy, right? Where would they have gone? There's nowhere to go.
If somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so moved by this and I want to support what Lindsey's doing, and it's a nonprofit, so people can donate to the work that you're doing. I'm seeing you nodding. So tell me what that process looks like. Is there a website? Is there a portal where they can enter their credit card? Can they mail you a check? How does that process work?
Those things. So they can visit our website, which is DBT Center Training Institute.org. And there's a donations button. You can read all about us. You can read about me. You can read about our students, things that we're doing. I need to update the website actually with our new students who are coming in soon. You can donate there. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. There's a link to our website from there. Our Instagram handle is DBT Center Training Institute. Our Facebook, I think, is just the DBT Center Training Institute. So you can find us in all of those places. And if you would like to mail us a check, there's an address on the website. Yes.
I'm so thankful for you, and I'm so thankful for your vision for what's possible to serve the underserved.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that you and I both have a heart for that, the work that we've done in various ways throughout our lives and even through friendships with people, helping people to improve their life. It's a big piece of who we are. And I value that so much, and I want to see this grow and succeed. And I would love to see it expand to a point where more people who want to help have the skills that they need and feel confident and equipped and able to help. Because I think there are a lot of people in the world that are helpers.
Oh, yeah.
But they maybe don't have the skills that they need to be as effective as they'd like to be.
Right. And the support, because you do need a lot of support as a young therapist, one, but as a DBT therapist too. When you're working with really suicidal, self-harming, or just really severe depression, hopelessness, like really severe anxiety, you need, as a therapist, support too. And that's the really beautiful thing about DBT, is that it's built in to the therapy to have a team that supports you and that sort of thing. But totally agree with you. I'd love to expand. And we do have students who want to come here, but I just don't have the capacity to supervise them. So we had, I think, 14 PhD student applicants this past year, and they all wanted to come here. But I was only able to take 3 because that's, from a budget and time perspective, that's like what I can do. But I would love it. I would love the nonprofit to be my full-time job, and for me to be able to expand and have 14 or 15 students that are oh my gosh, think about the pro bono services we could offer with that many students, and then also training that many people, and then they can go into the world and train other people. So the possibilities are endless.
Well, I love that. I love you and want to support you. And so part of that, there's so many different ways you can contribute to things that your friends are doing or something that you care about, right? Like you can contribute monetarily. You can also contribute just by telling people about this, right? Yeah. And that's part of why I wanted to have Lindsey on, to talk more about her life and her experience and what she does now.
Yeah, I appreciate all the support. And even if it's just, I got a message from a guy I went to Tufts with that I'm not close to, haven't talked to in probably 15 years the other day. And he was like, hey, I just want to tell you, thanks for the work that you do. It's so important that you're helping people in this way, and especially teenagers. And like, there's so many people struggling with mental health. And I just want to say thanks. And like that kind of thing too sticks with me. So like sometimes even if it's like you're like, the economy is terrible and I can't support this in this way, but even
I believe in you.
I believe in you.
Please keep doing what you're doing.
Like that's so motivating for me, like hearing that sort of thing. And not just for me, it is for everyone, I think. So remember that you can contribute in lots of different ways. And that's actually one of our skills that we teach in DBT, is contributing. And sometimes contributing is just telling someone, hey, good job, I'm proud of you, and like, that's a really good way to contrip. We would love
we got a skill in at the end. I love it.
We'd love your money, but also just saying hi and saying like, hey, thanks for doing what you do is also really nice. Yep. But also sharing, like if you can't contribute financially, I understand that. It's like the economy's tough right now, but sharing it with people a
follow on Instagram or Facebook is absolutely free. Sharing that this is Mental Health Awareness Month on your social media is also absolutely free. You can do those things, and you never know whose life you might impact down the road. Yeah. So, just something to consider and think about as we're about 2/3 of the way through May, but also something to consider just lifelong, right? Mental health is so important, and the conversation I want to continue to have with you. I'd love for you to come back monthly if possible, if we can make it work with our schedules. And over time, just kind of continue the conversation around mental health, how we can continue to raise awareness, maybe continue to make it more and more available to people who are underserved.
Right.
And also just open minds to, maybe this is something that I should look into for myself. This is a form of self-care. This might be something that, whether you go long-term or short-term, sometimes having a trusted professional that you can speak to, even for a short period of time, can be life-changing and add tremendous value to your life.
Part of our mission with the Training Institute is to do community outreach and educate people around mental illness and just having good mental health, right? Even if you don't have a mental illness, there are things you can do to improve your mental health. And that's one of the things that I really care about as well, is like ending the stigma. Let's talk about it and let's learn some ways to just make ourselves healthier and happier in the world. As it is Mental Health Awareness Month, like my sort of hope for everyone is that you'll take sometime this month to really think about little ways that you can improve your mental health, whether it is doing affirmations in the morning or taking 10 minutes to be mindful, reading, doing something that you enjoy. So, I hope all of you will take some time for your mental health this month and always, but especially this month, and maybe share with a friend. Tell a friend, like, hey, I'm doing this for my mental health. You want to join me? So that you can share the wealth.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The Celebrating Women podcast wants to hear from you. Email us a voice message to celebratingwomenpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear your story or the story of an incredible woman you know. Become part of the conversation on social media. Facebook.com/Celebrating Women Podcast. On Instagram, search Celebrating Women Podcast. The Celebrating Women Podcast has been presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in Cumberland Shopping Center or online at handandstonetyler.com. The Celebrating Women Podcast is created and hosted by Mandee Montana and Ashley Fisher. Support the show for as little as $3 per month at celebratingwomenpodcast.buzzsprout.com or visit our show notes. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Celebrating Women Podcast.